Hello, welcome to part 10 of starting a fountain pen collection. Um, Quite excited about this episode. Decided to add a new pen to the collection, so went to the store to test a few pens recently, and decided to buy a pen. And I can show you some of the pens I tested. Started off with a slightly cheaper models from the Faber-Castell. So I have the Emotion medium nib here. Just testing with some of the strokes. Inside the pen I'm using a red ink from the Platinum. It's called Platinum Classic Cassis Black. So here I have Faber-Castell again. This is the Ambition model in a wood grip, and it was with a broad nib. So here you see some good shading from the broad nibs, and also the Faber-Castell was also writing quite nicely. Also to test out in the same price range, or I try to keep it in the same price range. So the Pelikan M205 with a broad nib. As you can see, the lines are very thin. It almost looked like a medium here, but again it was writing quite nicely. But the ink flow just seemed to be a little bit slower than the Faber-Castell. It was really hard work to get the some of the ink out. So I decided to test a little bit further, and here's a Sailor 1911 standard, but in a fine nib. So for me, the fine nibs were very scratchy, and it was very difficult to get the ink out. And as you can see here, the ink it's almost disappeared. You can almost barely see the ink on the paper here after drying. So I decided to try a number of different nibs from the Sailor 1911. So this is the 1911 standard. Actually, I think this was the large version of the 1911 in a broad nib. So you can see very heavy ink flow. The ink is really coming through. The lines are extremely thick on this. So this it's almost like a double broad for me here. It may be a little bit too thick for me. And then I just put in my Visconti Rembrandt that I bought along with me. I always bring some of my pens along when I'm buying a new pen. Wanted to test or compare against some of the pens I already have. So I put my own writing in just to test out some of the ink against some of the pens and nibs that I'm looking at buying. Here again, I had a couple of Sailor medium nibs, so the broad was a little bit too thick. The thin was very fine, so I decided to look at a Sailor 1911 standard in the medium nib, and actually wasn't too bad at all. I mean, there was good ink flow. You can see quite some good color on this. The writing was quite smooth, and also it met with the budget. I think the Sailor large was around the 350 mark dollars. I think this one's a bit less, about half price, maybe $160-$170 for this pen. So, and also I think I much prefer the Sailor name over the Faber-Castell. I mean, I always associate Faber-Castell with pencils, so that's one of the things I have to kind of weigh up when I'm deciding. The Pelikan was also nice, but it looked a little bit light on the ink. So after a few minutes, I decided to buy the Sailor, and here it is. So I went with the Sailor 1911 standard with a 14K nib. If you just zoom in on that nib, you can see it's sometimes hard to get focus on there. I don't know if you can see that, but The pen comes with a converter because it takes sailor cartridges, and I don't really like using cartridges, so decided to get well, actually it came with the converter, so that was quite handy. So in the coming weeks I will put the pen into test, and I will cut into a time lapse now and to test some of the red inks, and hopefully to talk to you in a second. And here we are. This first one is with Diamine oxblood. So what I did, I cut off 4 different pieces of paper, put it on one sheet. So I have paper at 70 GM from Staples. I have the Moleskine paper. Not too sure what the GM on this paper is. I mean, if you know, let me know, because I can't really find it on the website. If I had to guess, it would be probably 70 to 72 GM. I looked at Goulet pens, and they have done some tests on the paper. I think they said 72 or so, but who knows. Here I have a Clairefontaine paper, the 90 GM, and also Rhodia at the 80 GM2 paper. And as you can see, there's some differences with the paper. I've given them some ratings. Start off with the lowest rating. I think the Moleskine paper, I give it 5 out of 10, mainly because there was a lot of feathering, and it just felt like tissue paper. It really soaked up the ink, and it wasn't pleasant to write on. I don't think the paper's made for fountain pens, but that's just my opinion. I don't know why that is. I mean, the Moleskine paper is everywhere in all the shops. I think they do have the marketing power, so it's just kind of pushing out the paper to everybody, and I'm guessing there's more ball pen and rollable pen users out there than fountain pen users. I think that's probably it. So but this is just my recommendation and my findings. And between the other 3 paper, they actually reacted quite well to the Diamine oxblood. It was quite smooth for the Rhodia, and also the Clairefontaine. It was kind of this glossy coating, and it's almost sliding off. I mean, I think for me it's a little bit too much. Slides off just a little bit too much for my liking, for my pens, and also the writing style that I like. And actually, to quite some surprise again, this 70 GM paper from Staples was actually just the right fit for me, in terms of drying times and how I want the ink to look afterwards when it's dried. It did something that just says, okay, this is quite nice to write on. I mean, it's very inexpensive paper. The ink looked really good, and as you can see here on some of the strokes, you can see some depth in the color, and as you move into different strokes, it's carrying a different color. But here, if you look on the Clairefontaine and the Rhodia, the color remains the same throughout. It's there's no shading, there's no difference. And here the color really shows off the oxblood on this 70 GM paper. So, and then what I've done, I've given ratings with the pen I used as well. So the Waterman Laureate, which was quite good with the Visconti ink, was very light with the Diamine blood, oxblood ink. The Schaefer, well, this is a 2.0 millimeter calligraphy nib, so it's always going to be heavy, but it's not an everyday use. So for me, it's good to showcase the color, but for me, is somewhere a little bit less would be preferable. So the Laminex was good, but the Kaweco was slightly better, and then the Visconti wins out on this one. If you look at some of the shading, you could see some depth in the color with the Rembrandt. You don't really see that in with the Lamy or the Kaweco, but you really see it with the Visconti. So I've given it 8 out of 10 on the Staples paper. So today's winner for the Diamine especially would be on the Visconti pen, on the Staples paper, and I will try and keep that updated in a database somewhere so I can compare this against other inks and other papers at a later stage. What I also did, again, a similar thing with the Waterman ink. Decided to add more pens here, so the full 10 pen range that I own was added to this. So again, Staples paper, Rhodia, Clairefontaine, Moleskine, and again the Moleskine. I think I'm pretty much done with the Moleskine paper now. I mean, it doesn't matter what ink I'm using, it's blotting up, and it just feels like a cheap, nasty paper, which is probably not, but in certain terms of fountain pen use, it just felt not suitable. So I may decide to try other papers instead of the Moleskine next time. Clairefontaine and Rhodia is always very similar, same paper. I mean, I don't know what the difference between the 80 and the 90 GM is, but if somebody knows, maybe they could tell me as well. I mean, as you can probably see here, it takes longer to dry on this 90 GM, which is probably why I had some smearing here. Again, the Staples was just sublime with the ink on all the pens. As you can see, the good range of depth of color on the calligraphy pen as always. Actually, the Waterman Laureate was working quite well with its own pen. The Twisby Eco, it shows off a darker shade of red, but this is using a 1.1 millimeter nib. The Vista again is showing good colors, but this is using a 1.5 millimeter nib. So these are more thicker nibs than you would normally use on a everyday use, but it really shows off the colors really well. For your everyday use, I would recommend somewhere in between a medium and a broad. The Visconti Rembrandt again is showing great depth of color with this ink. This is the Waterman Audacious Red, which is fairly inexpensive. You can get this for $8 or $9 a bottle, which is quite cheap. Again, I put in the Laureate 2 Mark II version. This is a slightly finer nib. And here's the new Sailor pen I added. Again, it's looking very nice with the Sailor pen, and it was also writing really well. So here, I think the Visconti and the Sailor it writes really well, and the colors are showing through. And also, I would probably add in the Twisby Eco. Actually, it's in between the medium and broad, and not quite a calligraphy type. So the 1.1 Twisby is actually showing some good results. So hopefully to catch you next time, and I will do some more tests in this style. Thank you for watching.